LiberalViewer presents.
So, welcome to LiberalViewer NBC Democratic Debate Clip Roundup. Thanks for joining me. I've picked out 11 of what I think are the best clips from the Democratic debate on NBC last night. That was also on YouTube. You may have noticed that this video doesn't appear to be monetized. I think maybe YouTube has some policy that you can't monetize its YouTube debate clips. So this is a good time for me to mention to my viewers that if you want to support my video making when YouTube decides not to monetize my videos, which seems to happen for a whole variety of reasons fairly frequently, there's a link down in the video description. You can become one of my patrons on Patreon. I've recently announced that I'll be giving out candles, LiberalViewer, hashtag LiberalViewer candles like these for everyone who's one of my patrons when their lifetime contribution gets to $30 and if they provide an address. So look for that. I'll be making that offer to my patrons later this month. But let me get to the debate last night. I have mostly clips of Hillary Clinton and Senator Bernie Sanders arguing about important issues. There are a couple Martin O'Malley clips mixed in there, but I'm going to show you the best clips that I found from the debate in chronological order. And if you're watching this as a recorded show, there should be time indexes down there where you can click to each of the 11 clips, whichever one most interests you. I have descriptions of what each clip is about, so you can decide which ones you want to watch and listen to my commentary. That's what makes this a fair use video that I should be able to monetize. And I'm going to start with my first clip is from very close to the beginning of the debate. It starts with the argument between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton on Bernie Sanders' record on guns. And we'll show you that clip now and then discuss it after you watch it here.
The last couple of weeks of this campaign have featured some of the sharpest exchanges in the race. Let's start with one of them, the issue of guns. Senator Sanders, last week Secretary Clinton called you, quote, a pretty reliable vote for the gun lobby. Right before the debate, you changed your position on immunity from lawsuits for gun manufacturers. Can you tell us why?
Well, I think Secretary Clinton knows that what she says is very disingenuous. I have a D- voting record from the NRA. I was in 1988. There were 3 candidates running for Congress in the state of Vermont. I stood up to the gun lobby and came out and maintained the position that in this country, we should not be selling military-style assault weapons. I have supported from day one an instant background check to make certain that people who should not have guns do not have guns. And that includes people with criminal backgrounds, people who are mentally unstable. I support what President Obama is doing in terms of trying to close the gun show loopholes, and I think it should be a federal crime if people act as strawmen. We have seen in this city a horrendous tragedy of a crazed person praying with people and then coming out and shooting 9 people. This should not be a political issue. What we should be doing is working together. And by the way, as a senator from a rural state that has virtually no gun control, I believe that I am in an excellent position to bring people together
Senator,
to fight for sensible gun safety legislation. But you did answer the question that you did change your position on immunity for gun manufacturers. So can you answer the question? What I have said is that the gun manufacturers liability bill had some good provisions. Among other things, we prohibited ammunition that would have killed cops who had protection on. We had child safety protection on guns in that legislation. And what we also said is a small mom and pop gun shop who sells a gun legally to somebody should not be held liable if somebody does something terrible with that gun. So what I said is I would relook at it. We are going to relook at it, and I will support stronger provisions.
Secretary Clinton, would you like to respond to Senator Sanders?
Yes. Look, I have made it clear, based on Senator Sanders' own record, that he has voted with the NRA, with the gun lobby, numerous times. He voted against the Brady bill 5 times. He voted for what we call the Charleston loophole. He voted for immunity from gun makers and sellers, which the NRA said was the most important piece of gun legislation in 20 years. He voted to let guns go onto Amtrak, guns go into national parks. He voted against doing research to figure out how we can save lives. Let's not forget what this is about. 90 people a day die from gun violence in our country. That's 33,000 people a year. One of the most horrific examples, not a block from here, where we had 9 people murdered. Now, I am pleased to hear that Senator Sanders has reversed his position on immunity, and I look forward to him joining with those members of Congress who have already introduced legislation. There is no other industry in America that was given the total pass that the gun makers and dealers were, and that needs to be reversed.
All right, Governor O'Malley, you saw.
So I thought that exchange was kind of a draw between the two of them, and one thing I thought was a little disappointing is if you watch my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup yesterday, I thought that there was a much more detailed exchange between the two of them with the clips I played on the gun issue from their separate interviews on the 4 Sunday morning shows they went on. And I thought it was more informative than what came out of the debate, which is a little disappointing. So yeah, if you want to see how they handled the gun issue in their separate interviews, go back to look at my LiberalViewer Sunday live clip roundup from yesterday. This next clip I want to play is one of the few Martin O'Malley clips I'm going to play because I think he's pretty much a non-factor in the Democratic primary. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section if you're a Martin O'Malley fan, if you think I'm being unfair, but this is Martin O'Malley reacting to the exchange you just watched between Senator Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton on the gun issue. Here he says that he listened to both of them and they're both inconsistent, and he's the one who knows how to pass gun legislation over here.
Tough gun control measures as governor of Maryland, and there are a lot of Democrats in the audience here in South Carolina who own guns. This conversation might be worrying many of them. They may be hearing, "You want to take my guns." What would you say to them?
Yeah, this is what I would say, Lester. Look, I've listened to Secretary Clinton and Senator Sanders go back and forth on which of them has the most inconsistent record on gun safety legislation, and I would have to agree with both of them. They've both been inconsistent when it comes to this issue. I'm the one candidate on this stage that actually brought people together to pass comprehensive gun safety legislation. This is very personal to me, being from Baltimore. I will never forget one occasion visiting a little boy in Johns Hopkins Hospital. He was getting a birthday haircut, the age of 3, when drug dealers turned that barbershop into a shooting gallery, and that boy's head was pierced with a bullet. And I remember visiting him. It did not kill him. I remember visiting him and his mother in Johns Hopkins Hospital, in his diapers with tubes running in and out of his head, same age as my little boy. So after the slaughter of the kids in Connecticut, Lester, we brought people together. We did pass in our state comprehensive gun safety legislation. It did have a ban on combat assault weapons, universal background checks. And you know what? We did not interrupt a single person's hunting season. I've never met a self-respecting deer hunter that needed an AR-15 to down a deer. And so we were able to actually do these things.
All right, Governor, thank you.
So Martin O'Malley did have a couple good lines. That whole thing about not needing an AR-15 to take down a deer, that was pretty good. And he did try to get himself in the mix there, but I don't think he was very effective moving himself up in the race. And like I said, I think he's pretty much a non-factor. And so I'm going to move on. Mostly, I think I may have one more Martin O'Malley clip a little later on, but this next clip starts off with Hillary Clinton, then goes to Bernie Sanders on the issue of police shootings of unarmed black men, basically. Or it starts off with a question, I think, from Lester Holt about the shooting of Walter Scott, which took place in South Carolina. He was shot by a police officer running away, and then a video showed up that refuted what the police officer said happened, and now that police officer is on trial for murder. And you'll see Hillary Clinton has a pretty good answer about the racist criminal justice system. And, you know, that's a really important issue of mine. Up here in the corner, you can see I have the new Jim Crow that talks about the institutionalized racism in our criminal justice system. And I highly recommend reading that book. It sounds like Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders have both read it. And I think Bernie Sanders' answer was a little better than Hillary Clinton's over here.
Hillary Clinton This is a community that has suffered a lot of heartache in the last year. Of course, as you mentioned, the church shootings. We won't forget the video of Walter Scott being shot in the back while running from police. We understand that a jury will decide whether that police officer was justified, but it played straight to the fears of many African-American men that their lives are cheap. Is that perception, or in your view, is it reality?
Well, sadly, it's reality. And it has been heartbreaking and incredibly outraging to see the constant stories of young men like Walter Scott, as you said, who have been killed by police officers. There needs to be a concerted effort to address the systemic racism in our criminal justice system. And that requires a very clear agenda for retraining police officers, looking at ways to end racial profiling, finding more ways to really bring the disparities that stalk our country into high relief. 1 out of 3 African American men may well end up going to prison. That's the statistic. I want people here to think what we would be doing if it was 1 out of 3 white men. And very often the black men are arrested, convicted, and incarcerated for offenses that do not lead to the same results for white men. So we have a very serious problem that we can no longer ignore.
Your time is up. Senator Sanders, my next question is actually my next question is for you.
Let me respond to what the Secretary said. We have a criminal justice system which is broken. Who in America is satisfied that we have more people in jail than any other country on earth, including China, disproportionately African American and Latino? Who is satisfied that 51% of African American young people are either unemployed or underemployed? Who is satisfied that millions of people have police records for possessing marijuana when the CEOs of Wall Street companies who destroyed our economy have no police records?
Senator Sanders.
So we need to take a very hard look at our criminal justice system, investing in jobs and education, not in jails and incarceration.
Just over a week ago, the chairman of the Congressional Black Caucus endorsed Secretary Clinton, not you. He said that choosing her over you was not a hard decision. In fact, our polling shows she's beating you more than 2-to-1 among minority voters. How could he be the nominee if you don't have that support?
Well, let me talk about polling. As Secretary Clinton well knows, when this campaign began, she was 50 points ahead of me. We were all of 3 percentage points. Guess what? In Iowa, New Hampshire, the race is very, very close. Maybe we're ahead in New Hampshire. In terms of polling, guess what? We are running ahead of Secretary Clinton in terms of taking on my good friend Donald Trump, beating him by 19 points in New Hampshire, 13 points in the last national poll that I saw. To answer your question, when the African American community becomes familiar with my congressional record and with our agenda and with our views on the economy and criminal justice, just as the general population has become more supportive, so will the African American community, so will the Latino community. We have the momentum. We're on a path toward victory.
Google's, actually, Governor, I'm going to come to you in a second, but Google searches for the words Black Lives Matter.
So, like I said, I thought Senator Bernie Sanders' answer there was better than Hillary Clinton's answer, and I hope he's right, what he was saying at the end, that as the African American community focuses more on the candidates, that he will start making up ground, because that is one of the reasons that he doesn't have a clear path to winning the Democratic nomination, because even if he wins Iowa and New Hampshire, which looks like he may actually do, then the next primary is South Carolina, where they're debating from, and there are a lot of primaries where there's a lot higher minority population and African American voters in the Democratic primary, where Bernie Sanders just hasn't been doing that well. So hopefully he's right that he will do better. And this next answer from Bernie Sanders, I think, also shows that He's really learned how to talk to the Black Lives Matter movement. And it's a question from a YouTuber. You know, this was the NBC YouTube debate, so they took some questions from prominent YouTubers, though I really hadn't heard of any of them. But this one's from Franchesca Ramsey, who seemed like a good question, so maybe I'll check out her channel. She asked about prosecutors investigating their own police departments that they work with, and you'll see Bernie Sanders had another good Black Lives Matter answer here.
Senator Sanders, a few times tonight we're going to hear from some of the most prominent voices on YouTube, starting with Franchesca Ramsey, who tackles racial stereotypes through her videos. Let's watch.
Hey, I'm Franchesca Ramsey. I believe there's a huge conflict of interest when local prosecutors investigate cases of police violence within their own communities. For example, last month, the officers involved in the case of 12-year-old Tamir Rice weren't indicted. How would your presidency ensure that incidents of police violence are investigated and prosecuted fairly?
Senator Sanders.
I apologize for not hearing all of that questions.
Would you like me to read it back to you?
Yeah.
Prosecutors, I believe there's a huge conflict of interest when local prosecutors investigate cases of police violence within their communities. Most recently, we saw this with the non-indictment of the officers involved in the case of 12-year-old Tamir Rice. Right. How would your presidency ensure incidents of police violence are investigated and prosecuted fairly?
This is a responsibility for the U.S. Justice Department to get involved. Whenever anybody in this country is killed while in police custody, this should automatically trigger a U.S. Attorney General's investigation. Second of all, and I speak as a mayor who worked very closely and well with police officers, the vast majority of whom are honest, hardworking people trying to do a difficult job. But let us be clear. If a police officer breaks the law, like any public official, that officer must be held accountable. And thirdly, we have got to demilitarize our police departments so they don't look like occupying armies. We got to move toward community policing. And fourthly, we have got to make our police departments look like the communities they serve in their diversity.
Secretary Clinton, this question is for you.
So, like I said before I showed the clip, I think Senator Bernie Sanders has really gotten his Black Lives Matter talking points down, and it's an important issue. If you, like I said, if you want more detail as to why the issues from those last couple clips are so important, I suggest you read these two books over my left shoulder. There's Michelle Alexander's book, The New Jim Crow, and Matt Taibbi's book, The Divide. They're both about, this is pretty much about the racist criminal justice system. This is about the classist criminal justice system. And if you read those, I think that you'll understand why I think that those are really important issues. Another big important issue that Senator Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton clashed more on than in that last one was the health care issue. There's been some back and forth. If you watched my Sunday Clip Roundup yesterday, you saw that Chelsea Clinton has been attacking Bernie Sanders for wanting to scrap Obamacare because he's proposed single-payer Medicare for all. And they talked about that somewhat in the debate. In this first clip, you'll see it starts off with Andrea Mitchell asking Hillary Clinton about that, whether Bernie Sanders is really trying to tear up Obamacare, if that's fair, and you'll see Bernie Sanders' response, and I will actually explain the details of Bernie Sanders' healthcare plan that he released a couple hours before the debate last night after you watch that clip. Let me make sure I get the right clip here. Yeah, over here.
Clinton, Senator Sanders favors what he calls Medicare for all. Now, you've said that what he is proposing would tear up Obamacare and replace it. Secretary Clinton, is it really fair to say that Bernie Sanders wants to kill Obamacare?
Well, Andrea, I am absolutely committed to universal health care. I've worked on this for a long time. People may remember that I took on the health insurance industry back in the 90s, and I didn't quit until we got the Children's Health Insurance Program that insures 8 million kids. And I certainly respect Senator Sanders' intentions, but when you're talking about health care, the details really matter, and therefore we have been raising questions about the 9 bills that he introduced over 20 years as to how they would work and what would be the impact on people's health care. He didn't like that. His campaign didn't like it either. And tonight he's come out with a new health care plan. And again, we need to get into the details. But here's what I believe. The Democratic Party in the United States worked since Harry Truman to get the Affordable Care Act passed. We finally have a path to universal health care. We've accomplished so much already. I do not want to see the Republicans repeal it, and I don't want to see us start over again with a contentious debate. I want us to defend and build on the Affordable Care Act and improve it.
Okay.
Senator Sanders?
Secretary Clinton didn't answer your question. Because what her campaign was saying, Bernie Sanders, who has fought for universal health care for my entire life, he wants to end Medicare, end Medicaid, end the Children's Health Insurance Program. That is nonsense. What a Medicare for All program does is finally provide in this country health care for every man, woman, and child as a right. Now, the truth is that Franklin Delano Roosevelt, Harry Truman, you know what they believed in? They believed that health care should be available to all of our people. I'm on the committee that wrote the Affordable Care Act. I made the Affordable Care Act, along with Jim Clyburn, a piece of legislation. I voted for it. But right now, what we have to deal with is the fact that 29 million people still have no health insurance. We are paying the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs, getting ripped off. And here's the important point. We are spending far more per person on health care than the people of any other country. My proposal: provide health care to all people, get private insurance out of health insurance, lower the cost of health care for middle-class families by $5,000. That's the vision we need to take.
Well, if I can, you know, I have to say I'm not sure whether we're talking about the plan you just introduced tonight or we're talking about the plan you introduced 9 times in the Congress. But the fact is, we have the Affordable Care Act. That is one of the greatest accomplishments of President Obama, of the Democratic Party, and of our country. And we have already seen 19 million Americans get insurance. We have seen the end of pre-existing conditions keeping people from getting insurance. We have seen women no longer paying more for our insurance than men. And we have seen young people up to the age of 26 being able to stay on their parents' policy. Now, there are things we can do to improve it, but to tear it up and start over again, pushing our country back into that kind of a contentious debate, I think is the wrong direction.
I have to talk about something that's actually working in our state.
No one is tearing this up. We're going to go forward. But what the Secretary neglected to mention, not just the 29 million still have no health insurance, that even more are underinsured with huge co-payments and deductibles. Tell me why we are spending almost 3 times more than the British, who guarantee health care to all of their people. 50% more than the French, more than the Canadians. The vision from FDR and Harry Truman was health care for all people as a right in a cost-effective way. We're not going to tear up the Affordable Care Act. I helped write it. But we are going to move on top of that to a Medicare for all system.
Andrea, I think...
So I personally think a single-payer system is better than this weird Obamacare system that still keeps the private insurers in the loop, and they take their cut, which, you know, they're kind of like vampires on the system in a way, and that's one of the reasons that the United States pays more than all those other countries, like Senator Bernie Sanders said. But exactly how you get, you know, the reason we have the weird Obamacare system is because that's basically all that could pass the House and the Senate. And, you know, after Ted Kennedy died and they had Scott Brown in there, they could only pass, you know, they could only send to the House what had already passed. And so it was a political necessity, and that's kind of what Hillary Clinton's point is. But I think it's also dishonest to say that Bernie Sanders wants to tear up Obamacare. He wants to move it to something better. You know, maybe if he shoots for single payer, we'll actually get the public option this time. Or, I mean, who knows what would happen if Bernie Sanders were elected and how he'd be able to work with Congress or not be able to. But like I said, Hillary Clinton is sticking to this he's going to tear up Obamacare thing, and I'm going to show the next clip on the same issue with Hillary Clinton talking about how Senator Bernie Sanders is going to, tear it up and start over. We can't start over, or whatever it is that she's saying. And then it goes into Andrea Mitchell questioning Senator Bernie Sanders about why single payers failed in Vermont, and he, sort of dodges that by saying he's the senator and not the governor of Vermont, and then pivots over into campaign finance being the real problem because of the pharmaceutical industry, which gives Hillary Clinton an opening to talk about how she's fought the pharmaceutical industry over in this clip.
To start over again with a whole new debate is something that I think would set us back. The Republicans just voted last week to repeal the Affordable Care Act, and thank goodness President Obama vetoed it and saved Obamacare for the American people.
Senator Sanders, let me ask you this, though.
Yeah.
You've talked about Medicare for all, and tonight you've released a very detailed plan.
Not
just
all that detailed,
well,
because
2 hours before the debate, you did.
Well.
But let me ask you about Vermont, because in Vermont, you tried in the state of Vermont, and Vermont walked away from this kind of idea of Medicare for all, single payer, because they concluded it would require major tax increases.
You might want
and
to
by
ask,
some estimates, it would double the budget. If you
Andrea,
couldn't sell
let me
it in
just say
Vermont,
this. Let me just say that. You might want to ask the governor of the state of Vermont why he could not do it. I'm not the governor. I'm the senator from the state of Vermont. But second of all, here is what the real point is. In terms of all of the issues you've raised, the good questions you've raised, you know what it all comes down to? Do you know why we can't do what every other country, major country on earth is doing? It's because we have a campaign finance system that is corrupt. We have super PACs. We have the pharmaceutical industry pouring hundreds of millions of dollars into campaign contributions and lobbying, and the private insurance companies as well. What this is really about is not the rational way to go forward. It's Medicare for all. It is whether we have the guts to stand up to the private insurance companies and all of their money and the pharmaceutical industry. That's what this debate should be about.
Well, as someone who has a little bit of experience standing up to the health insurance industry that spent, many millions of dollars attacking me, and probably will so again because of what I believe we can do, building on the Affordable Care Act, I think it's important to point out that there are a lot of reasons we have the health care system we have today. I know how much money influences the political decision-making. That's why I'm for huge campaign finance reform. However, we started a system that had private health insurance, and even during the Affordable Care Act debate, there was an opportunity to vote for what was called the public option. In other words, people could buy into Medicare. And even when the Democrats were in charge of the Congress, we couldn't get the votes for that. So what I'm saying is really simple. This has been the fight of the Democratic Party for decades. We have the Affordable Care Act. Let's make it work. Let's take the models that states are doing. We now have driven costs down to the lowest they've been in 50 years. Now we've got to get individual costs down. That's what I'm planning to do.
And that's time. We're going to take a turn now. Secretary Clinton in his final...
So those are the two clips I wanted to show on the back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders on health care. And I think that kind of came out to be a draw. As I said, I personally prefer Bernie Sanders' proposal. So on the substance, I think Bernie Sanders is the winner. But in terms of the debate, I think it was kind of a rhetorical draw. And I'm a little worried that Bernie Sanders' plan that includes, I think it's a 2.2% tax on income and then a 6.2% tax on employers' wages, giving wages. So that ends up being 8.4% tax on income, because employers will probably lower wages to make up for the 6.2%. That even though almost everyone in the middle class is going to end up paying less because they won't have to pay private insurance premiums, I think that the idea of a tax increase on the middle class is just too difficult for a politician to get the nuance in I think it might hurt him with voters who think that it's a middle-class tax increase, even though it ends up being cheaper than paying a private insurance premium. But you can let me know what you think down in the comments section. I'm going to move on to this next clip, which is another one of these very popular YouTubers, much more popular than I am, who I've never heard of, unfortunately. Connor Franta, I think is the name, asking Hillary Clinton how she can appeal to people in their 20s who seem to be much more interested in Senator Bernie Sanders' campaign. And I don't think she answers very well, but then again, I'm decades out of my 20s. Maybe that's why I don't know who Connor Franta is, but I decided that was an important clip to show here.
Blogger who has over 5 million subscribers. He has a question about the importance of younger voters.
Hi, I'm Connor Franta. I'm 23, and my audience is around the same age. Getting my generation's vote should be a priority for any presidential candidate. Now, I know Senator Sanders is pretty popular among my peers, but what I want to know is how are all of you planning on engaging us further in this election?
Secretary Clinton.
Well, thanks for the question, and congratulations on 5 million viewers on YouTube. That's quite an accomplishment. Look, this election is mostly about the future, and therefore it is of greatest urgency for young people. I've laid out my ideas about what we can do to make college affordable, how we can help people pay off their student debt and save thousands of dollars, how we can create more good jobs, because a lot of the young people that I talk with are pretty disappointed about the economic prospects they feel they're facing. So making community college free, making it possible to attend a public college or university with debt-free tuition, looking for ways to protect our rights, especially from the concerted Republican assault on voting rights, on women's rights, on gay rights, on civil rights, on workers' rights. And I know how much young people value their independence, their autonomy, and their rights. So I think this is an election where we have to pull young people and older people together to have a strategy about how we're going to encourage even more Americans to vote, because it is absolutely clear to me that turning over our White House to the Republicans would be bad for everybody, especially young people.
A quick follow-up, a 30-second follow-up. But why is Senator Sanders beating you 2-1 among younger voters?
Look, I have the greatest respect for Senator Sanders and for his supporters, and I'm going to keep working as hard as I can to reach as many people of all ages about what I will do, what the experience and the ideas that I have that I will bring to the White House, and I hope to have their support when I'm the Democratic nominee.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, big banks, big
So, like I said before I showed the clip, I didn't find that really persuasive. I didn't think her answer would be that persuasive to the 2-1 or the 20-somethings who 2-1 prefer Bernie Sanders to her campaign. But then again, like I said, I'm decades out of my 20s, so if you happen to be in your 20s and you were persuaded by that, you can let me know down in the comments section. Now, I've said many times that I haven't made up my mind who I'm actually going to vote for in the California primary, if there's still even a contest going on in June when they get out here to California. But I'm leaning towards Bernie Sanders, and the two main things that concern me about Hillary Clinton, even though I intend to vote for her in the general election if she's the Democratic nominee, the two main things I'm concerned about with her are her closeness to Wall Street and her hawkishness on foreign policy. And those are the topics of these next two clips, starting with the Wall Street issue that starts with Senator Bernie Sanders talking or defending a recent ad he ran that says that Hillary Clinton is too close to Wall Street. And this is about 5 minutes long. It's a back and forth between Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton on Wall Street. I think Bernie Sanders definitely wins this exchange, as I will discuss a little more after you watch that clip over here.
In which, without mentioning Secretary Clinton by name, you talk about two Democratic visions for regulating Wall Street. Quote, one says it's okay to take millions from big banks and tell them what to do. My plan, break up the big banks, close the tax loopholes, and make them pay their fair share. What do you see as the difference between what you would do about the banks and what Secretary Clinton would do?
The first difference is I don't take money from big banks. I don't get personal speaking fees from Goldman Sachs. What I would do is understand that when you have 3 out of the 4 largest banks today bigger than they were when we bailed them out because they were too big to fail, when you have the 6 largest financial institutions having assets of 60% of the GDP of America, it is very clear to me what you have to do. You got to bring back a 21st century Glass-Steagall legislation, and you got to break up these huge financial institutions. They have too much economic power, and they have too much financial power over our entire economy. If Teddy Roosevelt were alive today, the old Republican trust buster, what he would say is, these guys are too powerful, break them up. I believe that's what the American people want to see. That's my view.
Secretary Clinton, help the voter understand the daylight between the two of you here.
Well, there's no daylight on the basic premise that there should be no bank too big to fail and no individual too powerful to jail. We agree on that. But where we disagree is the comments that Senator Sanders has made that don't just affect me, I can take that, but he's criticized President Obama for taking donations from Wall Street. And President Obama has led our country out of the Great Recession. Senator Sanders called him weak, disappointing. He even in 2011 publicly sought someone to run in a primary against President Obama. Now, I personally believe that President Obama's work to push through the Dodd-Frank bill and then to sign it was one of the most important regulatory schemes we've had since the 1930s. So I'm going to defend Dodd-Frank, and I'm going to defend President Obama for taking on Wall Street, taking on the financial industry, and getting results.
Senator Sanders, a response.
Set the record right. In 2006, when I ran for the Senate, Senator Barack Obama was kind enough to campaign for me. 2008, I did my best to see that he was elected, and in 2012, I worked as hard as I could to see that he was reelected. He and I are friends. We've worked together on many issues. We have some differences of opinion. But here is the issue. Secretary touched on it. Can you really reform Wall Street when they are spending millions and millions of dollars on campaign contributions, and when they are providing speaker fees to individuals? So it's easy to say, well, I'm going to do this and do that. But I have doubts when people receive huge amounts of money from Wall Street. I am very proud. I do not have a super PAC. I do not want Wall Street's money. I'll rely on the middle class and working families for my campaign contributions.
I have a question for you.
You know, I think since Senator Sanders followed up on this, your profusion of comments about your feelings toward President Obama are a little strange given what you said about him in 2011. But look, I have a plan that most commentators have said is tougher, more effective, and more comprehensive.
That's not true.
It builds on the Dodd-Frank. Yes, it is. It builds on the Dodd-Frank regulatory scheme, but it goes much further.
Oh, come
because both the governor and the senator have focused only on the big banks. Lehman Brothers, AIG, the shadow banking sector were as big a problem in what caused the Great Recession. I go after them, and I can tell you that the hedge fund billionaires who are running ads against me right now, and Karl Rove, who started running an ad against me right now, funded by money from the financial services sector, sure think I'm the one they don't want to be up against.
O'Malley.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, Lester, what's second?
I'm not going to show you that Martin O'Malley clip, although there is going to be a Martin O'Malley clip in just a minute. But I think that Hillary Clinton almost fought that to a draw, even though I think, again, on the substance that Bernie Sanders is right, that he is much less aligned with Wall Street. And as someone who has that concern myself, after listening to that, I still have the concern. And I thought it was a little disingenuous of Hillary Clinton to try to say that Bernie Sanders was attacking President Obama when he was attacking her ties to Wall Street, although President Obama does have some ties to Wall Street. And Bernie Sanders even, I mean, when he said there won't be a Treasury Secretary from Goldman Sachs, I mean, that I'd like to see an administration where the Treasury Secretary won't be from Goldman Sachs, and I didn't see Hillary Clinton make that promise. So if you go into the substance, I think that Bernie Sanders won that round, but I think Hillary Clinton rhetorically fought it almost to a draw with, for the more low information voter, I guess. And like I said before, the next clip is on the other issue that I also have my most concerns with Hillary Clinton compared to Bernie Sanders, and that's foreign policy. In this question, Andrea Mitchell asked Hillary Clinton about President Obama's decision to draw a red line in Syria and then not follow up on the red line. It's actually mentioning an article with former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel in Foreign Policy magazine that I found out recently was written by someone I went to high school with, but that is totally irrelevant. But the question is about how we should handle Syria, and actually Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton seem to have more similarities than differences. The big difference is how they will treat Iran and working with Iran, and by extension Iran's ally, Syrian President Bashar al-Assad, and I will discuss that a little more after I show you that clip here.
Former Defense Secretary Chuck Hagel said in a recent interview that President Obama's decision to stand down on planned missile strikes against Damascus after Assad had used chemical weapons hurt the president's credibility. Should the president have stuck to his red line once he drew it?
Look, I think that the president's decision to go after the chemical weapons once there was a potential opportunity to build on when the Russians opened that door, resulted in a very positive outcome. We were able to get the chemical weapons out. I know from my own experience as Secretary of State that we were deeply worried about Assad's forces using chemical weapons because it would have had not only a horrific effect on people in Syria, but it could very well have affected the surrounding states, Jordan, Israel, Lebanon, Turkey. So getting those chemical weapons out was a big deal.
Should he have stuck to his line? Did it hurt U.S. credibility?
I think as Commander-in-Chief, you've got to constantly be evaluating the decisions you have to make. I know a little bit about this, having spent many hours in the Situation Room advising President Obama. And I want to just add to something that Senator Sanders said. The United States had a very big interest in trying to help stabilize the region. If there is any blame to be spread around, it starts with the Prime Minister of Iraq, who sectarianized his military, setting Shia against Sunni. It is amplified by Assad, who has waged one of the bloodiest, most terrible attacks on his own people, 250,000 plus dead, millions fleeing, causing this vacuum that has been filled, unfortunately, by terrorist groups, including ISIS. So I think we are in the midst of great turmoil in this region. We have a proxy conflict going on between Saudi Arabia and Iran. You know, one of the criticisms I've had of Senator Sanders is his suggestion that, Iranian troops be used to try to end the war in Syria and go after ISIS, which I don't think would be a good idea.
Senator,
but overall, a lot of the forces at work in the region are ones that we cannot directly influence, but we can try to bring more
we still
help
lack
to
human
the
intelligence to understand what happens next.
Where Secretary Clinton and I think, I agree with most of what she said, but where I think we do have an honest disagreement is that in the incredible quagmire of Syria, where it's hard to know who's fighting who, and if you give arms to this guy, it may end up in ISIS's hands the next day. We all know that. And we all know, no argument, the Secretary is absolutely right. Assad is a butcher of his own people, man using chemical weapons against his own people. This is beyond disgusting. But I think in terms of our priorities in the region, our first priority must be the destruction of ISIS. Our second priority must be getting rid of Assad through some political settlement, working with Iran, working with Russia. But the immediate task is to bring all interests together who want to destroy ISIS, including Russia, including Iran, including our Muslim allies, to make that the major priority.
But in all of that, Senator and Secretary, I think we're leaving out something.
So again, I'm cutting off before Martin O'Malley makes his answer, though actually this next clip I'm going to show in just a minute is starts with a Martin O'Malley answer. But like I said before I showed the clip, there's only a little bit of difference between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders in their approach to Syria and ISIS. I think Hillary Clinton wants to go after ISIS and Assad at the same time, which is something that some of our allies want. But Bernie Sanders wants to work more with Iran to get rid of ISIS and leave Assad for some diplomatic political settlement later. And, you know, because Iran is allied with Assad, so that lets us work more with Iran. And Hillary Clinton would work less with Iran and more with the allies that want to get rid of Assad. As to which is the better idea, that's kind of a complicated question. You can let me know what you think down in the comment section. But I do think if you listen to their foreign policy answers over time, that Hillary Clinton is still more hawkish and interventionist than Bernie Sanders on a lot of different issues. And so between the two of them, I prefer Bernie Sanders' foreign policy to Hillary Clinton's. I'm going to move on to another one of those clips where they have a popular YouTuber ask a question. This is another YouTuber I'm not familiar with who apparently has a much more successful channel than I do. His name is Marques Brownlee, and he asks about the balance between privacy and national security, and especially working with Silicon Valley to put in back doors into technology and what their position is. And you'll see Martin O'Malley first answers the question with real emphasis on back doors and front doors and needing a warrant. You know, what he says I actually agree with, and then you'll see a little bit of a follow-up answer from Bernie Sanders where he's asked a question about lone wolves, but goes back and answers the question from the YouTuber that you can see at the beginning of this clip.
This question.
Hi, my name is Marques Brownlee, and I've been making YouTube videos about electronics and gadgets for the past 7 years. I think America's future success is tied to getting all kinds of tech right. Tech companies are responsible for the encryption technology to protect personal data, but the government wants a back door into that information. So do you think it's possible to find common ground, and where do you stand on privacy versus security?
So, Governor O'Malley.
Thank you. I believe whether it's a back door or a front door, that the American principle of law should still hold, that our federal government should have to get a warrant, whether they want to come through your back door or your front door. And I also agree, Lester, with Benjamin Franklin, who said no people should ever give up their privacy or their freedoms in a promise for security. So we're a collaborative people. We need collaborative leadership here with Silicon Valley and other bright people in my own state of Maryland, around the NSA, that can actually figure this out. But there are certain immutable principles that will not become antique things in our country so long as we defend our country and its values and its freedoms. And one of those things is our right to be secure in our homes and our right to expect that our federal government should have to get a warrant. I also want to say that while we've made some progress on the Patriot Act, I do believe that we need an adversarial court system there. We need a public advocate. We need to develop jurisprudence so that we can develop a body of law that protects the privacy of Americans in the information and digital age.
That's Tom. You have all talked about what you would do fighting ISIS over there, but we've been hit in this country by homegrown terrorists, from Chattanooga to San Bernardino, the recent shooting of a police officer in Philadelphia. How are you going to fight lone wolves here,
yeah,
Senator
Lester,
Sanders?
year in and year out, I was the leader of the U.S.
That's a question, Senator Sanders. I wasn't clear. I apologize.
Okay. I just wanted to add, in the previous question, I voted against the USA Patriot Act for many of the reasons that Governor O'Malley mentioned. But it is not only the government that we have to worry about, it is private corporations. You would all be amazed, or maybe not, about the amount of information private companies and the government has in terms of the websites that you access, the products that you buy, where you are this very moment. And it is very clear to me that public policy has not caught up with the explosion of technology. So yes, we have to work with Silicon Valley to make sure that we do not allow ISIS to transmit information.
But in terms of lone wolves, the threat, how would you do it?
What we have got to do there is, among other things, as I was just saying, have Silicon Valley help us to make sure that information being transmitted through the internet or in other ways by ISIS is in fact discovered. But I do believe we can do that without violating the constitutional and privacy rights of the American people.
We have to go to a break, and when we come back, we're going to get to some of the burning questions these candidates have yet to answer.
So I thought Bernie Sanders gave a pretty good answer there, although maybe not that much familiarity with the specific technology, and just let's ask the technology people in Silicon Valley. I actually liked Martin O'Malley's answer, although I thought he was had a little bit of a strange emphasis on the whole front door, back door thing, but especially since front door isn't even really a thing, I don't think in technology, but I still don't think Martin O'Malley's much of a factor in the debate, which is why I didn't show many clips of him. I am going to show one more clip before I finish up this Monday live stream, this debate clip roundup. In this last clip, the topic is Bill Clinton, and you'll see at the beginning Hillary Clinton talks about how she might use Bill Clinton in a Hillary Clinton presidential administration. And then there's some sort of little interlude there, I can't remember, and then Bernie Sanders starts talking about, under questioning, starts talking about how he said that what Bill Clinton's sexual misconduct was, unforgivable or unacceptable or something like that, but he says he did it in answer to a question, and he's sticking to a positive campaign, and I think the most interesting part of this clip, when you get to that last part I was describing, is watching Hillary Clinton nod along. So it's obvious she wants people to see her nodding along to what Bernie Sanders is saying at the end of this clip.
Could be elected president. You have said that President Clinton would advise you on economic issues, but be specific if you can. Are you talking about a kitchen table role on economics, or will he have a real policy role?
Well, it'll start at the kitchen table. We'll see how it goes from there. And I'm going to have the very best advisors that I can possibly have. And when it comes to the economy and what was accomplished under my husband's leadership in the 90s, especially when it came to raising incomes for everybody and lifting more people out of poverty than at any time in recent history, you bet I'm going to ask for his ideas, I'm going to ask for his advice, and I'm going to use him as a goodwill emissary to go around the country to find the best ideas we've got. Because I do believe, as he said, everything that's wrong with America has been solved somewhere in America. We just have to do more of it, and we have to reach out, especially into poor communities and communities of color, to give more people their own chance to get ahead.
Senator Sanders, a 30-second response, sir.
Great ideas from Governor O'Malley, Secretary Clinton. But here's the truth. If you have an administration stacked with Wall Street appointees, they ain't going to accomplish very much. So here's a promise that I make. And I mentioned a moment ago how corrupt the system is. Goldman Sachs, paying a $5 billion fine, gives this country in recent history a Republican Secretary of Treasury, a Democratic Secretary of Treasury. Here's a promise. If elected president, Goldman Sachs is not going to bring forth a Secretary of Treasury for a Sanders administration.
Senator Sanders, let me ask you a question. You called Bill Clinton's past transgressions, quote, totally disgraceful and unacceptable. Senator, do you regret saying that?
I was asked a question. One of the things, Andrea, and that question annoys me. I cannot walk down the street, Secretary Clinton knows this, without being told how much I have to attack Secretary Clinton. Want to get me on the front pages of the paper? I make some vicious attack. I have avoided doing that, trying to run an issue-oriented campaign. I was asked a question.
You didn't have to answer it that way, though.
Well,
why did you?
Then if I don't answer it, then there's another front page story. Yes. And I mean this seriously. You know that. We've been through this. Yes, his behavior was deplorable. Have I ever once said a word about that issue? No, I have not. I'm going to debate Secretary Clinton and Governor Malley on the issues facing the American people, not Bill Clinton's personal behavior.
We will take a break. We'll continue.
So that's the last clip I want to show you, and I guess that's the clip. I mixed it up with that Wall Street clip. That's the clip in the middle there where Bernie Sanders said the thing about how he won't appoint a Secretary of the Treasury from Goldman Sachs, and I thought that was a really effective point, but I guess it got lost in the middle of that whole Bill Clinton back and forth, so maybe it wasn't as effective an point as I kind of thought it was. I've been reading your comments along the way. Sorry, I didn't really have much of a chance to interact with the live viewers. I had almost 200 live viewers, and if you're watching this as a live or a recorded show, you can let me know what you think of the debate based on these clips down in the comment section. Who won? I mean, I think actually it's almost getting to the point where it's turned around. You know, they kept saying Hillary Clinton won the first debates by not losing, but Bernie Sanders has caught up with her in the polls in Iowa and New Hampshire, and so the expectations have almost switched around where I think Bernie Sanders is almost in the position where he can win the debates by not losing them, and that he gains stature by going up against Hillary Clinton, who's supposedly the inevitable nominee, and showing himself to actually have some better ideas and even some better rhetorical flourishes and certainly better authenticity. I don't know. I've heard some people say that Hillary Clinton is much more authentic one-on-one in person, and I seem to remember showing a clip on my Sunday Clip Roundup where she talked to some BlackLivesMatter activists, and there was sort of surreptitious video, and she actually did seem much more authentic in that particular encounter than I've seen her in debates and interviews. But I don't know. I think Bernie Sanders is doing really well, and I'd like to see him do better. I saw someone in the comment section along the way asking why it is I'm so sure that Hillary Clinton's going to be the nominee. Why am I so down on Bernie Sanders even though I like him? Well, I don't know. Maybe I just listen too much cable news and too much conventional wisdom, or maybe I just have too much experience watching politics to see something so out of the ordinary happen, although it's happening on the Republican side with Donald Trump, although whether that's going to be a reality or not still remains to be seen with the voters. It's pretty exciting that February 1st is Iowa and February 9th is New Hampshire. We'll actually start having some votes rather than all these polls. Who knows what's really going to happen. One thing you can depend on happening is next Sunday I'll be doing my live clip roundup. As I said, I think yesterday's live clip roundup in some ways was a better back and forth between Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, and a better explication of the differences on the issues than you saw in the debate. So I recommend going back and watching that if you didn't see it. And it's not just because that's monetized and it looks like YouTube won't monetize this video, but speaking of not monetizing the video, if you want to, you can help me continue making these videos, whether or not YouTube decides to monetize them, by becoming one of my patrons on Patreon. There's a link down in the video description where you can support my videos on Patreon. And like I said before, if you give a lifetime donation of $30 or more, you get one of these hashtag LiberalViewer candles made by Paul Robinette Candles. And I also wanted to let you know that I will be making a video, an edited, produced video I've been working on. Should be ready sometime in the next couple days. I may release it to my Patreon patrons first, but then it will go live for everyone. It's titled All 4 Fox News Women Can't Figure Out Male Privilege Questions. So it does have to do with feminism and male privilege, which I know can be a controversial topic with some of my viewers. So look forward to that, and I'll be interested in seeing what you all think of that. And I hope you enjoyed the 11 clips I picked out from the debate last night, especially in what turns out to be an unmonetized video, unless YouTube accept some appeal of mine to monetize this video, but look for my new edited, produced video coming out sometime later this week, and next Sunday I'll be doing my Sunday clip roundup, probably 5 or 6 p.m. Pacific time, which is Greenwich Mean Time minus 8 hours, and until then, I guess I'll be seeing all of you around the internet.